Chapter 1, Summary Part 2. So, we are moving on from the goals of psychology and the different methods. So, just to recap, the goals of psychology are to describe, explain, predict, and control the behavior and mental processes, as well as doing this by using the scientific method. Descriptive methods are methods that observe and describe the behavior, and they identify factors associated with the behavior. They describe, hence descriptive methods. Correlational methods show the relationships among variables. Does knowing one predict the other? Is there a correlation between these methods? Now keep in mind, correlation does not equal causation, so then we have experimental methods which do show causation and they explain behavior. In the experimental methods, the experimenter they manipulate one variable and measure the changes that occur in the second variable. So, descriptive research methods include your naturalistic observation, case studies, and surveys. Surveys are information gathered from people, including questionnaires and interviews and opinion polls. You will remember from last class we already talked about naturalistic observation, which is in which you just observe. Case studies are where it's an individual person's story or life or case, basically. It's a lived experience. Surveys, however, are information gathered from people, and they can include questionnaires, interviews, and opinion polls. Now, population is the entire set of individuals. A sample is a group of people selected from the population. So you have your target population. Your goal is to obtain a representative sample from that population. So, with descriptive statistics, you collect the data. So you could be that if the entire class, per se, took a test to figure out whether they were type A or type B personality, then a descriptive statistic could be that the score on type A personality questionnaire out of 10, you would find the mean, the median, the mode, the standard deviation, the count, the range. So, statistics, and with statistics you have a frequency distribution, which is a summary table or graph of how often the scores occur. There's a symmetrical distribution when talking about statistics and graphs, as in has the scores fallen equally on both halves of the graph. That is symmetrical distribution. There are different measures of central tendencies. So your mode is the most frequently occurring in a score, and there are times where you have multiple modes, in which case you just record all of them. The median is the middle point in an ordered set of scores, and if there's an even number, then you take the two middle scores and divide by 2. Mean is the average of a set of scores. Finally, measures of variability are your range, which is a measure of the difference between the highest and the lowest score. So take your highest point, subtract it from your lowest point. Standard deviation is the average difference between every score and the mean. To calculate this, you find the difference of each score from the mean, square the differences, find the average of that mean from the squared deviations, and calculate the square root of the average. I know that was a lot, but in class they'll go over it more. Correlational studies are relationships between two phenomena. If one changes, does the other change too? Can we predict one if we know the other? It's shown in the form of scatter plots or scatter diagrams. A positive correlation is where high scores of one variable are associated with high scores of another, or low scores of one variable are associated with low scores on the other. Negative correlation, high scores of one variable are associated with low scores on the other. Zero correlation is where it doesn't really matter whether nothing really increases or decreases, it's all random. The coefficient of correlation is the mathematical measure of correlation, known as an R-square. R-scores vary between -1 and +1. The signs indicate the direction of correlation. They can be positive or negative correlation. The actual number indicates your strength of correlation or how much scatter or variability there is. A 0 is that there's no correlation, and a plus or -1 is perfect correlation. Most correlations fall somewhere between those, so like a 0.1 or a 0.9. Now, the limitation of correlations is they can be misleading. So, for example, during these summer months, the number of crimes increase, as well as the number of ice cream that's consumed. Does this mean that consumption of ice cream causes crime, or crime causes an increase in ice cream consumption? Well, no. There's the third hidden variable of it being hot outside. It's important that you keep in mind correlation does not equal causation. Moving on. The direction of possible causation is not clear. So, for example, alcoholism is correlated with depression, but which came first, depression, which caused alcoholism, or alcoholism, which later caused depression? Well, the truth is both are possible, or there could be a third variable. Now, the limitations of correlations continued. There are two behaviors that can occur in the same direction together, but the connection between the two due to a common link with some third variable. A third variable is an unknown factor that could cause both. So, for example, alcoholism could be correlated with depression, but it may also be correlated with low serotonin levels, which cause both alcoholism and depression. Now, experimental research. It's a controlled test of a hypothesis. The researcher will manipulate one variable to discover the effect on another. So you could test the effects of alcohol on anxiety. The independent, or your IV variable, is the one that the experimenter is manipulating. It's the thing that's getting changed. Dependent variable is the one the experiment predicts will be affected by the manipulation of the independent variable. So, what are you testing? What are you measuring? What do you hope will be changed? The typical method is to compare two or more groups, such as your experimental group and a control group. Now, the experimental group is a group that receives treatment, while the control group is a comparison group which is not exposed to the same treatment. It's important with the experimental method that random assignment happens. An alternative method, however, is each participant serves in both control and experimental conditions. Each participant is measured more than once, and it's called a repeated measures or a within-subject design. This is known as a longitudinal study, just because think of long, it's long in time. Now, inferential statistics help interpret the results. They determine how likely it is that a study's outcome is due to chance. Unusual criterion for statistical significance is the probability that the result occurred by the chance of less than 0.05 or 5%, 1 in 20. So, in summary, from the methods and themes, keep in mind the goals of psychology, which we discussed in the previous video. Keep in mind there's descriptive, correlation, and experiment methods, describing, descriptive methods, correlation, relationship, prediction, experimental, causation. Descriptive include observation, case studies, and surveys. The biggest thing with statistics, know how to do the mean, median, mode, and range. Know how to do, or at least know what standard deviation and variance are. know that as a positive correlation is both of them go in the same direction. So it could be both variables go up, both variables go down. Negative correlation, one goes up as one go down. So they go in opposite directions. Zero correlation is it's all over the place. We can't tell, the correlation coefficient is the actual number. So if I had a negative 0.5 versus a positive 0.75, 0.75 is the positive isn't what makes it stronger. What makes it a stronger correlation is the fact that it's closer to 1. That just means it's a positive correlation, so both variables are going up. And remember, correlation doesn't equal causation. Know the difference between independent and dependent. Be able to read an experiment and say this is the independent, this is the dependent. But that is, for the most part, all you need to know for Chapter 1, other than the themes of psychology.